My name is Brooklynn Loiselle. I'm a senior majoring in public relations, and I wrote my senior thesis about how the news media used the 2019 IAAF World Outdoor Track and Field Championships to frame Qatar and evaluate its performance as a host nation. I had the absolute privilege of getting to cover this event in person as a journalist with the SOJC Track Bureau, and while I was there, I noticed some things that really helped to inspire this research. The first thing that I realized is that Qatar is investing so heavily into sport right now. They were hosting this World Championships and they were preparing for the upcoming 2022 FIFA World Cup. And I also noticed that there were a lot of themes surrounding Qatar as a host nation. There were themes that the IAAF and Qatar were using to promote the event and to promote Qatar as a country. And there were also themes that journalists were talking about in their questions that really made me ask, how are these articles framing Qatar? And what does this mean for them? Obviously, we know through media framing theory that these themes matter to Qatar because the way that it's framed in these articles can influence public opinion. And Qatar isn't the first nation to use international sport as a means of promoting itself. We saw it in the World War II era with Nazi Germany and with Japan, and while those situations were successful in that they helped to promote the host nation's agenda, that has not been as successful recently with host nations such as Brazil and South Africa. Nonetheless, Qatar is using this method right now, and I'm hoping to discover whether or not this event helped to positively or negatively impact its publicity. And so as you can see in that research question, that I had 4 questions that I came into my research with. Generally, those questions were, what were the themes? How were the themes framed? Where did those themes take place within the articles? And did they mention the 2022 FIFA World Cup? Does this have some sort of long-term implication? And I went ahead and I looked at a qualitative content analysis of some credentialed media that were at the World Championships in order to conduct this research. And what I found was that 40% of all of the articles included themes about Qatar as a host nation, with themes of heat and attendance occurring the most frequently. Interestingly, some of those preferred themes that Qatar and the IAAF were using in its branding were not translated into the journalists' coverages, such as the first time being in the Middle East, the largest event ever in the Middle East, it being unique, or helping to develop the sport. Those were not used that frequently. Similarly, 75% of the articles that contained themes framed Qatar negatively or very negatively as a host nation. That's not what Qatar was hoping for, obviously. And what I also found were some interesting, significant relationships that were statistically significant, and that is on the side in the significant relationships bubble. I'm going to walk through those really closely. So my first significant relationship was the use of themes and the date that the article was written. I found the articles that were written after the conclusion of the World Championships were much more likely to include themes, and actually 100% of those articles that included themes framed Qatar negatively or very negatively. Moving on to table 2, the type of article and themes being present, it's interesting to note that results-based articles included themes about Qatar 35% of the time. You wouldn't typically think about that, as these are articles that are focused more on competition. Nonetheless, they did, and they might attract a different type of reader, so that's interesting to keep note of. Additionally, the type of publication and the overall framing. American articles that contained themes about Qatar framed it negatively or very negatively as a host nation 100% of the time. That's a lot of big data. And so why does this matter? Oh, I just need to touch on my other 2 things really quickly. I realized that most of these frames were occurring secondary framing, and that the FIFA World Cup was not mentioned as frequently. Nonetheless, why does this matter to us? As we look forward, Eugene is hosting the next World Championships. It will also be the first time this event is in the United States. We need to learn from these mistakes in order to get positive publicity for the U.S. and for University of Oregon. It's also important to note this, as it might impact Qatar's public perception moving forward, and it helps us to learn more about international sport as a whole.